slide up? Yes, brilliant. Okay. So, as promised, this talk is about what is going to happen with the DNS starting on the 1st of February. It's about changes to resolver behaviour and how they are going to react to authoritative servers. So it's not just for the DNS geek, so if you're not a DNS person, don't turn off right away. It's for organisations who have authoritative zones, and potentially it could affect their presence on the internet. It also potentially is going to be of interest to ISPs and people running corporate resolvers, because they may find that after their next upgrade or over time that some zones stop being resolvable and they're going to start getting complaints from their clients and their consumers. Aha. So what's it all about? The majority of modern DNS software now complies with all modern DNS standards, particularly around handling a thing called eDNS options. And this is the part of the DNS that enables servers to communicate between themselves and determine whether or not the server they're talking to is going to support the new option that they want to communicate with. But if servers don't support eDNS or don't respond to eDNS, then it's not possible for resolvers to say, okay, you're going to do this new feature and find out whether they will or not. So not everyone is actually running new software. Sometimes they are running the latest software, but there is middleware sitting in between. That'll be things like load balancers, routers, filters, etc. Some of them are misconfigured, some of them just don't know about modern DNS features. But the problem is that the non-compliance or the non-compliant behaviour means that the resolvers, that's the servers that are getting the answers to the clients, are having to accommodate. So historically, resolvers have been quite nice and tolerant, and have said, okay, I didn't get an answer, so I'll just retry this, and I'll just try that, and I'll just do the other. The downside of that is that the software is much more complex than it needs to be, but it's also performing more slowly than it needs to be in certain circumstances. So it's slowing down the whole DNS infrastructure. So, come the 1st of February, the plan is that no more Mr. Nice Guy in the DNS. When I originally wrote this slide, I had originally titled it, "Are You Bothered?" But I was so offended by the spelling, I changed it. So this may or may not hurt you directly. If it is going to hurt you, it might not hurt you right away, because the changes are coming in new versions of software, and so they will come in gradually as things are upgraded or as providers, online cloud providers, start upgrading how they behave. You need to know about it if you have a zone of your own or a domain of your own, because it might affect you. You may find that some ISPs can no longer reach your zone. You might need to know about it if you're running resolvers, because your consumers or customers come to you and say, but I can't get here anymore. What's happened? And you need to be able to know whether it's the DNS that's causing the problem or something else. So yes, I think you do need to be bothered. All of the folks on this slide have signed up to this. If you go onto the presentation material that's linked to the UKNOF site, there are actually links from those organisations to the pages that they've put up, saying what they're going to be doing. The next 5 slides I'm going to whiz through quite quickly. They're for reference, coming back to this afterwards, so that you know which versions of software are the ones that have got the new code in them. So for bind, unless you're running something pretty ancient, your authoritative servers will be doing the right thing. For resolvers, from 9.14, which is to be released soon this year, that's the new stable version, the accommodating behaviour has been removed. So you will see a change in your resolvers, anybody running 9.14. It was actually put in 9.13.3, which is the dev version that we've been working on this year. Whereas with bind, unless you're running something really ancient and crusty, you probably need to be running something slightly less crusty for your authoritative servers, per the slide. But PowerDNS 4.2, I'm nodding at the PowerDNS guy down there, is the first version that's going to cut out the accommodating behaviour. Not is blessed. It is blessed because it's the new kid on the block, and so it never really did have much in the way of non-accommodating behaviour in the first place. So not consumers probably won't see much of a difference. I got a little bit more information from LNet Labs than I did from some of the others. So I put that up on the slide that gives you a little bit more detail about what they are and what they're not going to do. Very, very similar story to what we're doing in bind, actually. An aside here that it is perfectly acceptable not to support eDNS, providing that you say, when asked if you do it, back to the resolver that's asked you that you don't do it. There's a downside to this. The downside is that if you're not supporting it, then sooner or later you're not going to be able to do new, shiny, better secure, better privacy, better performance, better DDoS mitigation techniques. So it's good to be able to support eDNS, but it's not obligatory. And then all of the others. You noticed that there were some cloud-based resolver providers up on the original list. They'll also be implementing the changes and removing their workarounds. So you'll find that, for example, over time, that Google DNS and others are no longer going to be providing the answer. So you shouldn't find yourself in the situation, say as an ISP, where your customers come to you and they say, oh, I can't get to this site anymore, but I can resolve it through 8.8.8.8. That's also not going to happen in the long term. So it's a bulk of people all doing this at the same time so that we've got enough momentum to make the changes. The next 4 slides are essentially the good, the bad, the ugly, and the meh situation. So there is a tool, if you go to the DNSFlagday.net site, you can very easily test your domain. So the question is, who's going to be hurting here? Ideally, you want to have the green go sign, and ripe.net are fine, fully compliant. The DNSFlagday.net site is a wrapper for a more sophisticated tool behind the scenes that gives you more detailed answers. But the traffic light system is designed to make it really easy for you to see rather than having to look at what the answer actually is that comes from eDNS Comp. Check all of your domains. Check all of your subdomains. The name that you put in here needs to be the name of your domain, not the name of your site. So don't stick the www in front of it or the service in front of it, but go for the domain. Okay, here's a bad. Bad because this zone is going to vanish from servers that have got the new no more workaround software. I'm afraid I laughed a little bit because the reason this one doesn't work is because the name servers at future.net.uk are not compliant. And I had a little quiet giggle about that. So if anybody knows anybody, your zone could be starting to vanish soon. Next, we have the ugly. And I think this is almost worse than a complete failure, because this is going to half work. Sometimes you'll get there, sometimes you won't, sometimes it'll be slow. And it's not going to look like a DNS problem. Test it, and you'll find out that maybe what you thought was a network problem, an infrastructure problem, is actually a DNS problem behind the scenes. So what I'm expecting by now, can I have a show of hands? How many people have actually gone to DNS Flag Day and looked up their own domain? Just as I suspected. And how many of you have got that warning triangle? Or possibly it's just not working, I don't know. So if you do get the meh response, it's not necessarily a big problem. It means that, yeah, you'll be okay after DNS Flag Day over time, but that your site isn't quite compliant. There may be some problems later on. You might want to look into moving your DNS to somewhere that is properly eDNS compliant, so that you don't have problems in the future with new features, new functionality, new things you want to implement. So suppose you've got a fail, not the fail because the tester didn't work, but you've actually got a non-green to go. There's a link provided that gives you a more detailed report about what went wrong. You need to check and see what it says in more detail, and at that point, I freely admit that the report that comes out of eDNS Comp, which is the tool that's providing it, is a little bit obscure and obtuse. So, yeah, the first thing to do is to look and see what DNS software you're running, or ask your hosting provider to check what they're running. If it's not the latest, do you need to upgrade? Are you running something really old that really doesn't do what you need it to be doing? Maybe it's not the DNS software. Maybe it's what's sitting in front of it. Maybe you have a load balancer or proxy that isn't quite properly configured. And there are some classic problems with incompletely configured load balancers, for example, that will proxy for all of the IPv4 addresses for a domain, but won't return anything for the IPv6 addresses. That's a problem, and that will cause you to get flagged up. Another thing you can do is run your domain through another tool called DNS Viz, which is pretty good at picking up. It was designed originally for testing DNSSEC compliance, but it's also pretty good at talking to all the servers and spotting other problems with the zone. And zones that have problems with eDNS compliance, the problems that are going to hit you with Flag Day, quite often have other problems as well. So that's another good tool to use. And also, do you have any firewalls or packet filters? There's some really good packet filtering and intrusion monitoring software out of there, but there's also some fairly old stuff that thinks it knows about DNS packets, but doesn't really, and therefore is blocking stuff with the new DNS features. And not everyone is a DNS expert, so most small organisations have ops and sysadmin staff that are jack of all trades and Jills of all trades. And if it's a bit too much of a challenge immediately, do ask for help. There are lots of resources out there. What about the resolvers? So far I've talked all about making sure that you and your domains don't disappear off the internet after DNS Flag Day. But sooner or later, you're going to find that you need to update your in-house resolvers. And then you're going to have people coming to you and saying, oh, can't get here anymore. Maybe, maybe not. So that's the point where I'm saying, if you're running resolvers, remember that there was a talk on this at UKNOF, and come back and have a look at the slides and have a look at the tools. What you want to be doing is checking to see whether the place that your user can't get to is something that's been affected by DNS Flag Day because you just upgraded your resolver. And I'm going to take a hard line on this. Somebody else's domains are their problem to fix. If you come back to the providers who said DNS Flag Day, and say, oh, can't you just put this workaround in? You're going to get a hard no, because that's the whole point of DNS Flag Day, is to get the authoritative servers or the authoritative domains to actually comply with modern DNS standards. Sorry. If you want to be really nice, try and contact them. You might not be able to email them if their DNS is broken, but there are usually other ways to reach them. Having said all that, it's not all doom and gloom. The reason DNS Flag Day is now is because we've been monitoring for a long time, and we know that on the whole, most authoritative servers and authoritative domains are in compliance. This particular graph is showing everything that doesn't comply. So although it shows quite a high proportion as not compliant, it's not just the red lines, it's the maybes and the warnings as well in there. So the good, the bad, the ugly, and the meh all included in that. So in conclusion, check, fix. If you see any funny problems, check, and remember the talk. Any questions?
Any questions for Cathy?
Hi, Dave Friedman from Clarinet. Just a very quick question. It would be really useful to give a quick list of the most common workarounds that resolvers make use of that will be removed from resolver software, because these give people some very can give people some very clear ideas about where the compliance issues are coming from. So, for example, the one transport protocol works but another doesn't, or there's an MTU issue, so we try reducing the payload size. That can very quickly tell somebody where the problem is if they know that workaround's in place and is being removed.
I don't think we're removing the MTU workarounds. We're just simply removing the fallback to not using EDNS workaround. So where where authoritative domains are not responding or appearing not to respond, and I say appearing not to respond because there may be other reasons why they're not, but where they're appearing not to respond when a query is sent to them that has the new EDNS options in it, we're not going to fall back and try without EDNS options anymore. That has a knock-on effect because if you haven't got EDNS, then you're also reducing your packet size as well and reducing a bunch of other things. So it might be something else in there. But the basic principle is no more falling back to trying without. If a server comes back and says, no, I don't support it, great, we will do it without it. But if it doesn't respond at all, we don't know and we're not going to retry. Timeouts are the killer. For the record, I'm afraid we swamped the DNS testing site and apparently it's down. We broke it. Come back and try later. Sorry, guys.
Hello, Phil from Google. What's your plan to monitor whether people have actually turned on this flag or not? And as a follow-up question, how long do you think how long is the day going to be before the flag's raised to your satisfaction?
Are we going to monitor it? I don't think we can. We can monitor whether authoritative servers are compliant or not. Monitoring resolvers, it depends who's running what. It's up to the. We could probably monitor what the cloud providers are doing, but I don't think we could monitor so easily what individual organisations have installed and are running. Keith looks like he's about to say something different on that.
Not so much, sorry, Keith Mitchell, DNS.org. Not so much to ask you a question as just to address the previous question, which is that when you're running testers like that, if you keep the data from the test results, then generally you can time sequence them, and that will give you an idea of the uptake. So if ISC is keeping the data, then that potentially could be helpful.
I do not know if we are. I think we probably are because we're giving a link to individual test results that you can refer to later, which means we must be keeping it. Man behind the scenes who might know more.
Only indirectly. Sorry, Ray Bellis, ISC. We do keep a cache of recently collected results, but after a short while they end up getting deleted. But they could last for weeks. Currently, the cached entries.
Interesting question. Thank you.
Oh, got one more question.
Hello, David Gross from Akamai. Are there zones out there that are deliberately broken in such a way that people could test to go, this is an example of something that's broken like this, rather than ones that are going to get fixed?
That's a good question. There probably are, but I didn't find them when I was looking for them, and I didn't try hard enough. There are definitely some broken zones out there. And one of the things I started doing was looking for zones that were in the UK that were broken, because this is a UK conference, which is how I found the futura.net.uk zone. I also started wickedly to go through the attendees and thought, I'll have a look at their organisations. And I thought, no, it's wrong to name and shame if I do find broken ones.
Yeah, I was more meaning like ones that are deliberately left there for people to be like, this is an example of this broken in this way.
There probably are. Do you want me to find out and post them in the chat room later?
Yeah. Excellent. Thanks, Cathy.